Hello, good day. Today, our guest is Professor John A. Gentry, and we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and its adverse effects on the U.S. intelligence system. Hello, Professor John. How are you doing?
Oh, good day to you. Thanks for the invitation.
I read your articles. I love research, and I saw one of your articles published on the website Econ Journal Watch. So I decided to read it, and that's why we're having this discussion. But John, you are also the author of a book. You recently published a book titled Diversity Dysfunction: The DEI Threat to National Security Intelligence. Would you like to talk about it?
Certainly, this is a recent book. It has a long story going back several years involving DEI's involvement in the politicization of U.S. intelligence. But I wrote an article that talked about claims by the U.S. intelligence community that DEI helped the operational performance of the agencies. Found that it was not the case, and some of my readers said, "Why don't you take a look at the question slightly differently? What are the operational effects of DEI on U.S. intelligence?" So that's what this book is about. I started it originally as a follow-on article, but it got long and it became a short book. So it documents the passage from presidential directives to operational performance in the field and in terms of analysis as well. And it shows that DEI policies have been very damaging to the operational performance of U.S. intelligence and thence indirectly to U.S. national security.
Professor Gentry, what is intelligence? What do we mean by national security intelligence?
Well, what I'm referring to here is intelligence that relates to foreign activities and analysis that will help national decision makers make better decisions. So it's not police intelligence. It's not domestic security intelligence.
And what do intelligence agencies need to be successful? What are the required skills?
Well, there are quite a number of them, and there's actually quite a long literature on that. The intelligence business, in fact, requires a lot of skills for various kinds of people. So among the most commonly known ones are operators in the field who recruit agents who provide information of use, so what we call human intelligence or human. So this requires interpersonal skills and a sense of adventure and ability to operate independently around the world. There are a number of technical skills that are used. And then in my area in particular, that of analysis, which is the process by which raw information becomes the final product of intelligence agencies, which goes to senior decision makers and hopefully makes them a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser, and helps them to make better decisions. So in the analytic case, you're thinking about good education, native intelligence, curiosity, a little skepticism, an ability to put pieces of information together to integrate stories. That involves needing to deal with uncertainties a lot, and to try to control one's emotions and one's politics. One of the key requirements of the intelligence business in the United States and in most Western countries is analytic objectivity. And this again is a problem that DEI causes because it's basically an ideological orientation, and it causes biases in the analytic process.
But is diversity ever relevant?
Certainly, what we really want, and all intelligence services want, is diversity in outlook, diversity in perceptions, diversity in experiences. So the United States intelligence focuses on the entire world. So we need people who are knowledgeable about countries in South America and East Asia and Africa and so on, and who have skills related to that. That often involves living in those countries, knowing those cultures, knowing their languages, and so on. And for those people who are in the human intelligence business, being able to blend in foreign operational environments makes good sense. So in Africa, for example, it makes sense to have some people who of African heritage. If operating in Latin America, people from South American heritage, and so on. So demographic diversity is sometimes important, but the more important thing, traditionally seen in our services and in the literature that describes U.S. intelligence services, is intellectual diversity. And
I
intellectual
agree.
diversity is always a product of individuals, not large identity groups.
I agree. So a diverse military will include somebody with a degree in computer science and an expert in the ethics of warfare or military philosophy. That's diversity. Getting somebody because she's a woman or trans, that's not diversity.
It's not diversity in terms of being able to perform in an effective individual way. No. So what we have done in the United States, going back to the Obama administration, there was a executive order, one of his presidential orders of 2011 that really set this in motion, was a directive to the federal workforce, including the intelligence community, the intelligence agencies, to not look as much at individual characteristics, but to look at group identities, and to hire and promote and assign people on the basis of their group identity. And that has caused all kinds of problems, because the individual diversity characteristics that we've just been talking about are less important in this ideological scheme.
So what's the objective of diversity, equity, and inclusion? Because the word inclusion is included in the tagline, but obviously some groups are excluded, like white men.
Well, white men are specifically not excluded, but they are explicitly discriminated against. So we now have, in fact, even going back before President Obama's time, and to some degree going back into the 1960s, we have had legal and policy measures that provided affirmative action, so-called, to specific groups that have been deemed to be worthy of encouraging in various ways. So this would be racial minorities, this would be women, this would be disabled people, this would be military veterans, for example. But in the Obama years, we had a strong push to get literally more people of the favored identity groups. And the term that is commonly used now by administration officials, by large numbers of people, is that the desire is to make the federal government look like, quote, look like, unquote, America. So it's at a demographic, group, and superficial level that we're talking about federal diversity policies at the moment.
But Professor John, how will Americans benefit if the military or the broader intelligence community looks like America? How will America benefit from that? The Chinese don't care if the American military is diverse. The Russians don't care.
Well, no, they don't, and certainly living in operating in South Asia or in East Asia or in Europe, it really doesn't help to look like America. It doesn't help if you're operating in Singapore to look like you're an American Indian, for example.
Exactly my point, because the Chinese, they take military strategy seriously. So sometimes American commentators know that several Chinese students are studying STEM at the best universities in America, and they could be spy, but many Chinese students are also studying Western philosophy and Western strategies of war. So the Chinese, their approach to warfare is more serious and critical than the Americans. They're not wasting time wondering if the head of the army is a woman or if that person is gay. They don't care. They are reading American philosophers. They're reading American historians because they want to conquer America. Well, they're not going to say that, but obviously they have a plan for the world.
Right. Well, I'm inclined to agree with you. The the Defense Department, the U.S. military, as you say, is affected by the DEI policies too. Again, President Obama pushed it. President Trump basically ignored the issue, and current
Exactly.
President Biden,
Important
current
point. President
current
Trump
president,
ignored the issue. That's what you said.
yes,
Yes,
I think
exactly.
I
I
think
would
he
like
did.
to
I'm sorry.
I would like to elaborate a bit because people pan President Trump as a far right crank, but he's not. He's an opportunist. President Trump pandered to Hispanics, blacks, women, LGBT people, and Jews when he was the president. He was in favor of DEI. I remember Trump being at an event, signing a document to say that more women will be promoted in STEM. Trump was not very different.
No, it was not very different. That now has changed, and he has said publicly, and some of his advisors or people who claim to be his advisors in any case have said publicly that to recognize that there was in essence a mistake made in the 4 Trump years, and that if he's elected in November 2024, that he will address DEI issues. So this
Professor
could be a significant. There could be a significant change if he's elected in 2024.
Professor Gentry, in a previous article, the critique of the US intelligence community's diversity claims, you rip arguments in favor of diversity apart. Somebody called Carmen Medina, she was mentioned, and she cites a number of studies arguing that diversity has advantages, but you contend that this is not so. I would love to hear your critique of those studies.
Okay. Uh, Back up just a little bit. President Obama, as you know, as we've talked about, initiated the DEI claims. The initial claim was that this was ethically good and it was good for the country and so on. Well, fairly soon after that, people began to say, gee, discriminating against qualified white men, for example, is really not helping. That this is damaging the performance of the agencies. So roughly in President Obama's second term, so call it 2013-14, roughly, you began to see claims by senior intelligence officers that no, 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 no. In fact, it wasn't the DEI is not just ethically good, but it's good for performance. And DNI Director of National Intelligence Jim Clapper basically just kind of said, well, if we have some people who think of things differently, this would be wonderful. And Carmen Medina, as you mentioned, went a little bit farther and borrowed language from Catherine Phillips, Professor Catherine Phillips, now deceased, unfortunately. She was a professor at the Columbia University Business School, and she wrote an article published in Scientific American that claimed basically that racially integrated groups work better together because people from different groups feel a need to compete against demographic others. And what Medina did was translate the kinds of comments that Phillips had made and McKinsey Institute, McKinsey and company had made before that. Excuse me. Which said basically that that DEI helps American businesses. So she combined these together and said that again, excuse me. She said that the competing against another and the virtues of demographic diversity domestically could be applied without modification to the foreign operations of the intelligence communities and of the intelligence community, and so she then argued that case in a fairly short article. She said in her title, "You want to make intelligence better, hire people who look like America." So again, the superficial demographic nature of the argument. And I think she did not make her point. There are lots of reasons for that. Talk about some of them in that article. There are some others that didn't make it into the final version, like the fact that a lot of the work that intelligence analysts do, for example, is not group in nature; it's individual work, and the people who review the papers that analysts write are from large varieties of different groups that constantly change. And the ethic, actually, an important point. The ethic for analysts going back many years was that you want to do good work and have it accepted by the institution. So your competition is in essence against the standards of CIA or the other agencies, and not a competition against the demographic other. So for a large variety of reasons, this defense, I think, has failed pretty miserably in justifying the claims. And in fact, another point here, there's actually law and intelligence community policy that says that all analytic claims by U.S. intelligence people should be backed by fact, where at all possible. That's not always possible because we're dealing with a future sometimes. But there's a remarkably little amount of actual evidence in the claims made by the senior leaders of the U.S. intelligence community. So the conclusion, I think, is pretty clear that the rationale here was a defense against claims that DEI had hurt the IC performance-wise, and it was ideological and political in nature.
I agree, not necessarily because I want us to have a productive conversation on the show, but during my own research, I have discovered that the claims for diversity are pretty weak. The Harvard Business Review recently published an article contending that diverse workplaces can be more contentious because people from different backgrounds don't always get along. Their frame of reference is different. Culturally, they're also different, and that leads to tension.
Well, I think that's right. And even Catherine Phillips wrote that very, very clearly in the article that I mentioned earlier. That her point was that despite that, on top of that, that the competing against the demographic other trumps everything. But another way of looking at this is to say, well, if there really was a need for demographic diversity, wouldn't we be seeing evidence in the intelligence failures of the past, the many intelligence failures of the past? Wouldn't we be seeing evidence that there was a lack of demographic diversity and that was a cause of failure? Well, there's no evidence of it. I mean, literally none in the significant and growing literature on intelligence activities around the world. There's no evidence of that. And some of the best cases of intelligence performance have been done by people, mainly men, of countries that were at the time fairly demographically homogenous. So The Soviet Union, which had a pretty good intelligence service, and the KGB relied almost entirely on Slavic men. There were very few women and very few non-Slavs there. And one of my favorite examples here is the deception, the intelligence operation that led to the deception in 1944 that fooled Adolf Hitler and the German military high command into thinking that the Allied invasion of Western Europe was going to occur in northern France instead of in Normandy. This was done virtually entirely by Caucasian British men, almost no women, almost no Americans involved. And it was spectacularly successful. It was done by demographically identical people with very, very different background, interests, professional educations, and individual human characteristics. And those individual characteristics came together to produce a magnificent operation from a British perspective.
No. Now, we know that the US military is highly sophisticated, and highly sophisticated groups such as the US military will rely on different assessments to examine the potential of future candidates. So there are cognitive assessments, psychometric assessments, and all of these assessments can be used to determine the relevant levels of diversity. So from my standpoint, like yourself, I think we both agree that what matters is really the scientific analysis of diversity and the type of people we want serving America so that we can win war, defeat our enemies, and produce better technology if that's necessary.
Mm.
So I don't know, I get what you're saying. I do get what the critics of DEI are saying, but sometimes I really wonder, is America a real place? No, why would any
Is it a
like
real
seriously,
place?
yeah, no, but why would any serious person assume that the military will be better because of trans people? Remember, a trans woman is a man who thinks that he's a woman.
Right.
So why would
Well,
somebody
well, I
from
think
that
there are two.
background make a difference? That's a
I
form
think
of confusion. Well, I just can't get it. I can't wrap my head around this theory.
I think there are two groups of people who believe that. The first group of people is a naive group of people who believes the second group, which is the more important group, and that is that DEI is basically a Marxian concept. So you're familiar with critical race theory.
Yes.
There, going back a number of years, back to the 1930s, the so-called Frankfurt School of German Marxists came up with what they call critical theory, which is designed to be Marxian ideological studies devoted to finding gaps, finding weaknesses, finding fissures within Western societies that then could be exploited by Marxists. And there have been, fast forward here, a lot of critical theories in intervening years. So critical legal studies, critical pedagogy, critical race theory, or DEI rather, is a direct descendant of critical race theory. From a Marxian standpoint, the purpose is not to improve institutions in which DEI is implemented. It's to create divisions. It's to damage these institutions. And I actually have found in my studies of U.S. intelligence community, one person in particular, who used to be in a diversity office, who told me flatly the purpose of the so-called employee resource groups, which are demographic breakouts of the workforce into small groups that are supposed to protect each other and so on. That these are designed to be divisive. And so I think what we're seeing here in no uncertain terms is an effort to divide the federal workforce, divide the country, divide businesses.
And
and
who will win?
to a large degree, it's succeeding.
And who will win? Who will be the winners?
Well, the goal here, if you go back again, skipping a lot here, the whole purpose of this Marxian effort, and there's a large literature that talks about what the Soviets started to do via the Comintern a little over 100 years ago now. Comintern was formed in 1919, and has been operating in the United States for over 100 years now. The purpose of this effort was to subvert the capitalist republic that we have in the United States, to overthrow it and to generate a Marxian regime that was loyal to Moscow. Now, clearly, Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore, but the people who were pushing for revolution and a radical change in American society, American government structure, their descendants are still here, and they're pushing very hard for that still here in the United States, just as other people are doing in the United Kingdom and some other countries in the world. So the goal
I
here is revolution.
I haven't read your book as yet. I've read the studies, but I browsed through the book and I remember you making reference to the example of a Christian person. If you don't remember the story, that's okay. But I want to know if DEI is also anti-Christianity specifically.
It's anti-religion.
Okay,
So because religion of all sorts is antithetical to Marxism, because it's a competing claim on faith, and it provides a competing sense of morality and ethics and rules of behavior, which are incompatible with Marxism.
exactly. What's also fascinating about the counter research is that the counter research has shown that many of these claims either don't make any sense or they did not exist in the first place. So essentially, these claims are fake news. So, for example, you in your article noted that some of these studies were not even examining demographic diversity. So, how can you use a study that was not arguing for demographic diversity to contend that demographic diversity is beneficial? There's a lot of deception going on.
Well, in a sense, yes. I think it may even be simpler than that. It's just an ethical claim, and people who buy the program. And again, some of these people are hardcore Marxists. They know exactly what they're doing. Others are, what the Marxists call fellow travelers, and others of them are what Stalin called naive dupes. They're people who simply believe what they're told. But there, as I say, there is no evidence here that is widely held that supports anything about the DEI in the military, your focus, or in the intelligence community, or any place else in government. The one area where there are claims for correlations. So you know the difference between correlations and causality, of course.
Yes.
There are claims that diversity in senior leadership of U.S. corporations is associated, is correlated with better profitability measures, for example. But even this claim is disputed. So there really is not a good evidentiary base for it in any aspect of society, so far as I can tell. And then when you go from the domestically defined, business-oriented, profit-oriented studies where the case is strongest or less weak, and into the government sector, then you're taking a leap that just is not sustainable by sound research.
what I find even more striking is that the average American and the average white person in America is not aware of what we would call wokeness or DEI. So when I speak to people, I don't get the impression that they follow this part of the news. They're quite oblivious to what has been taking place. So I was somewhere recently and two white men were surprised that they went to an establishment to do business. And one of the managers said, okay, there is this promotion that's targeting trans people. And if you're trans, you can benefit from some of our services. And the two white men, they were flabbergasted. And I said to them, that's becoming the norm in Western societies. How could you not be aware? I find that many white people don't follow this part of the news seriously.
Well, I would agree with you, and I think they are not appreciating what its intellectual origins are of the sort we've just been talking about. And uh, uh, two explanations come to my mind. One is that too many people are really just not paying attention. But secondly, the people who are pushing DEI and related policies are doing so deceptively. So
Yes.
they're making a point of misrepresenting what we're talking about here. So DEI in the popular the popular frame has nothing whatever to do with Marxism or revolution. It has to do with social justice. It has to do with improving the 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 quality of life of many Americans. It has to do with integrating people, not dividing them, and it has to do with making the world a better place. So you don't say, I'm a Marxian revolutionary who wants to destroy your society. You say instead, oh, this is a wonderful program that is supportive of social justice. I'm not a Marxist. I'm really a progressive. I'm looking for progress. And who can be against progress and social justice?
Well, obviously Marxist because economic freedom, that's the road to social justice, not Marxism. There's actually this paper noting that there's a positive relationship between economic freedom and lower levels of inequality. So if you care about social justice, we need more capitalism, not more Marxism. Furthermore, this doesn't baffle me any at all. But DEI advocates, they hate the notion of intelligence. Why are they so against written exams?
So they
Why
against
are
what now?
DEI advocates against examinations and test scores? They
Well,
hate exams.
yeah, this gets into an area that's a little beyond my area of expertise. I have some opinions on this, but I mean, basically they're saying that all demographic groups should be scoring the same on everything, and if that's not the case, then that's solid evidence of discrimination. So
Well, I saw
we
a story.
don't want to have discrimination.
Yeah. I saw a story recently. 71% of Black applicants passed a test, 91% of white applicants passed. Most Black applicants were successful, but the 29% of applicants who failed adjudicated the matter in court, won, and were compensated. But most Blacks were successful. But the issue is that 71% of blacks passed, 91% of whites failed. This could be due to a number of issues. I don't think it's that important. Most blacks passed, but because of disparate impact legislation, it was adjudicated, and the failures who should improve themselves to get better grades were rewarded.
Well, I mean, the difference, the different statistical figures that you talk about are replicated in many aspects of
Exactly.
society, and
Exactly.
there is
And I'm
never
not bothered. I'm a black person, but I'm not bothered. I only care about variables. I really don't care that much. I'm not bothered in at all.
so there's uh, not an effort to go beyond uh, an assertion that this is evidence of discrimination. You had on your show Professor Ferguson some time back, who who said largely the same thing, I believe.
Professor Ferguson, remind what's his first name? I didn't have Neil Ferguson. Which Ferguson was it?
Diana, that doesn't sound quite right. So it was a man.
Yeah, it was a man. Maybe I'll remember. But I know I discussed a similar issue with John Garren. We were talking about charter schools and education.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you have listened to my videos, I'm really interested in education.
No, this is an important issue, and what's happening in education and business, in lots of other aspects are related to what I'm talking about here in the intelligence world, but they're slightly different in focus. The details are different, and some of the ramifications are different too. So, in education, you have questions of success rates and dropout rates and so on. And in the military, you have questions about whether you have good fighters or not. In the intelligence world, ramifications can be things like intelligence failures and presidents making bad decisions. So the consequences can be somewhat different in different aspects of society.
You have been using the term Marxism for quite a while, and I do agree with some of what you have been saying. But if you follow the literature closely, it becomes evident that Black women are essential to DEI. Black women. So on page 54 in your book, you gave the example of a Black female ambassador who was appointed by a president to lead a project. We're not going to talk too much about that, but throughout the literature, Black women are extremely important to DEI. Why?
Well, because the general view is that the people who are important to ensuring that there is diversity should themselves be, quote, diverse. So you get two for the price of one, in essence, by having a black woman
Yeah,
as a
yeah,
DEI
yeah.
officer.
I know why I'm laughing because the claim is that Blacks are disadvantaged due to slavery and women are disadvantaged due to the patriarchy. So Black women, they face multiple disadvantages. So
That's
that's what,
that's that's the argument. So if
yes.
you go back to some of the early days of critical race theory, you talk about Kimberly Crenshaw, for example, talking about, yeah, intersectional oppression by white men and so on. So intersectionalism would mean you've got people from different demographic groups in the same body, and these people and people with other intersectional characteristics ought to work together. So in essence, you have not only in the federal government, anecdotally, I've not seen statistics on this, and anecdotally, it's pretty clear that the overwhelming majority of chief diversity officers in the federal government are minority women. And that is true in universities too, where we do have statistics. So we know who the chief diversity officers
All
are.
right.
They're
So,
overwhelmingly minorities and women.
all right. So, Professor Gentry, thanks for coming on. If you're available, I can send a second link if you have more free time, if you're available.
Sure,
All
be happy
right,
to.
good. So I'm going to close this link.